Welcome to the Racial Day of Reckoning Assembly, focused on creating space for reflection, connection with one another, and community in healing with trauma. Before we begin, I have some business to cover. We will be recording this event and have heard from the City Attorney's Office that this verbal communication and written notification you'll see at the top of the screen will suffice as a Tennyson warning. Therefore, if you don't want your image captured, please turn off your camera now so that we can begin recording. I'll pause so you can do this. This session is now being recorded. Those who do not give consent for their images to be captured have been asked to turn off their cameras. Welcome everyone to today's assembly. I would also like to offer a reminder to adhere to the city's COVID safety guidelines throughout today's gathering. Please keep your face mask on if you're not presenting or eating. Also, maintain a social distance from one another. With that, I would like to introduce Anna Meyer.
Hi, everyone. My name's Anna Meyer, and I'm a holistic healing practitioner here today to help just lead us through some exercises and acknowledge the place that we're at. The first acknowledgement that I'd like to do is to acknowledge that we're on stolen land, that we are on Dakota land, we are on occupied land, unceded land, and that reality runs through all of us every day. And so what I'd like to do is actually just invite us all to notice that we're actually here in this room. Those of you who are joining us by camera, notice the space where you are. Maybe you're in your office. Perhaps you're in your home office. Perhaps you're sitting outside or near a window. And I just invite us to just notice that we're actually breathing. That's it. Nothing special about our breath other than it's happening. And I invite you to just take a look around the room, turning your head just a little bit. Noticing the walls, the windows, the floor, the ceiling. We come today with so many layers of the past year, and our bodies remember all of those layers. Our bodies don't know what the date is. They don't know what happened last week or 10 years ago, but they have all the information of all of our experiences. So I invite us to just actually acknowledge all of the truths that are within our bodies, all the conflicting truths at the moment, the pain, the anger, the hope, the gratitude, and the range of all of those things. I invite you to, if it feels right for you, to put your hand on your chest. And I invite you with the next few of your breaths to just breathe that breath in and out of your heart. And what we hope today is that this grounding, this awareness, and this resourcing that we can find within ourselves and each other help support the work and the change that we have still to do. May this work help us survive another day to be able to do that important change work. And I invite you to release that and shake your arms out, because you gotta move too. And I turn it back over.
Thank you. Now that we are grounded, I'd like to call up to read a poem, Ebony Adedayo.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Today, I will be reading a poem, Chaplains of Destruction, from my book, The Gospel According to a Black Woman. I originally wrote this poem back in 2018 in reflection on the murder of Thurman Blevins. As working for the Division of Race and Equity, the weight, the harm that Black employees that I felt in trying to support work inside of an institution that routinely kills Black bodies. Here we are doing the best we can, giving all we have, laboring day in and day out, sleepless nights, restless days, heartburn and indigestion, fatigue and burnout, trauma upon trauma inflicted upon our mortal bodies as we stand with arms straight up trying to keep the sky from falling. But the foundation is crumbling. In fear, it wages war against anything and everything that challenges its authority, pretending to be Oz, but we done looked behind the edifice a long time ago. There is no wizard, no greatness, no magic about its being. Like a virus, it feeds on others, Black fathers and sons, small immigrant children, the land and the sea. It continues to consolidate power, grasping for whatever it can reach, taunting those that don't realize that for all it purports to be, it has no clothes and it is dying. Dying a slow and painful death like all the greats before it, becoming a non-entity, an afterthought, an embarrassment for all those that live in its borders, a laughingstock to all those that live without. Old and see now, it is beyond decay. It continues to suck air, but it can't even breathe on its own. That's why they slay us. That's why they cut us down, confusing us with Jesus. They think our blood will save it. We think we can save it. Perhaps if we adjust our strategies, change up our tactics, we can keep the walls from closing in. So we fight and resist not for our liberation, but for its preservation. Failing to realize that at a moment's notice, it will dispose of us as it disposed of them. Don't get me wrong, we are all well-intentioned. We hope against hope that our work, our projects, our committee meetings, our prayers can change things, and that our efforts might keep this beast on life support a little while longer. But trust, the day is coming when all the breath will go out of its body and nothing will save it. Not equity, not diversity, not inclusion, not policy reform, not the Democrats, and definitely not the Republicans, not all the well-intentioned people, not the dispossessed people. Babylon is falling, and we can't save it. That magnificent city is crumbling at its core, and we can't prop it back up. But we can save ourselves and our children and our family and our community. This thing is dying. We can't set our hope on its reformation. The death angel is at the door. It's about to cross over into eternal damnation, not paradise, not with all its blood on its hands. The bodies it has crucified testifies against it. Will we do so too? Or will we continue to nurse what is already dead? I can hear the bagpipes playing in the distance. The mourners are lining up on the streets, chilling behind the hearse. They scream and grit their teeth in disbelief because this is where they have placed their hope. But there is no salvation here. That which has robbed so many lives cannot give it. The things that have caused so much war and pain are in no position to extend peace. But don't you worry. Those whose bones are buried beneath its foundations will come back to life. And mothers will reunite with their sons. Fathers will come home and daughters will sing for joy. Land will be restored to its rightful owners. The sea will once again give life, and the holy waters of heaven will flow as they did in the beginning. And we will live again as the empire lives permanently underneath our feet. Ashe.
Now, we will remember people of color, both locally and nationally, who have been lost due to racial injustice. We realize that this is not a comprehensive list. Sadly, the list has actually grown since we wrote it. After I read each name, but I was going to say there are too many really for us to read today. We could take up the whole program. So after I read each name, we will toll the bell, and I invite you to take a moment of silence to remember that valuable life lost. George Floyd. Daunte Wright. Travis Jordan. Philando Castile. Jamar Clark. Breonna Taylor. Ahmaud Arbery. Trayvon Martin. Michael Brown. Adam Toledo. Tamir Rice. The many others, locally and around the nation, who have been the victims of racial injustice. Thank you. At this time, we will acknowledge the impacts that this past year has had, and we will commit to creating a better future, one that realizes racial justice in the workplace as well as in our city.
We acknowledge that the murder of George Floyd was committed by police officers formerly employed by the city of Minneapolis. It is one of the reasons why racism was finally declared a public health emergency in Minneapolis. It resulted in a worldwide racial reckoning. We are standing in the epicenter of that reckoning.
We recognize the City of Minneapolis as a government entity that is historically divided and caused harm to BIPOC residents, and that despite our current efforts, these practices continue today. We also recognize that years of incidents, including the murder of George Floyd, has caused significant trauma to employees of the city, especially our BIPOC employees.
As an employer, we need to provide more care and support to our BIPOC employees always, and especially during these challenging times. This is an important part of what it means to create a caring and anti-racist environment.
We recognize the devastating intergenerational harm of systemic racism and racial injustice. This has caused unacceptable gaps in educational achievements, income, poverty rates, unemployment, homeownership, incarceration rates, and health outcomes, including the coronavirus pandemic. We accept collective responsibility for pain we have caused as we've done our jobs and as stewards of the City of Minneapolis policies. We recognize we can never undo the past, but we can learn from it by including and listening to the BIPOC community and BIPOC staff and those who have been negatively impacted by the city.
We understand that caring for employees, especially our BIPOC employees during times like these, is a part of a role of each and every city leader in the city of Minneapolis. We can't care and support the public if we don't care and support each other. We are committed to embedding this expectation in our recruitment, performance management, and other people processes.
We acknowledge that this work is not singular, but collective. All City of Minneapolis employees are in this worthy endeavor together, regardless of department, race, religion, sexual orientation, or gender identity, color, or nationality, and any attribute that makes us beautifully different. To do this, we will need to be courageous, passionate, and unwavering. And we are.
Many of these acknowledgements, recognitions, and commitments have been captured in an employee-led commitment letter, which we invite you all to read, and if your heart directs you to do so, to sign electronically. This letter is available online and the link that has been put in this chat. At this time, we will hear from Saray Garnett Hohuli, to give us a testimony.
Thank you, Chief Tyner. The killing of George Floyd impacted me on several levels. To be honest, it crushed me. I was numb. Not again. The following days, I watched Minneapolis and St. Paul burn. I was under curfew. I was angry, hurt, frustrated, and exhausted. Why is a Black life still not valued? Where is the humanity? I thought we were making progress. I had those feelings before these feelings. This is not a singular occurrence. Black man killed, outrage, talk. Black woman killed, outrage, talk. Black boy killed, outrage, talk. Black girl killed, outrage, talk. March 3rd, 1991, 30 years ago, Rodney King was beaten by LAPD officers during his arrest. I was a senior in high school. I watched LA burn. The concept of racism was functioning and in full effect, and I wanted to stop it. You see, I was born in a mixed family. My father is Black, my mom is white. The community they created was amazing. We appreciated other languages, cultures, and ways of being. I was comfortable with being uncomfortable, and I was raised to love myself and appreciate all of me. And I loved being Black, and I love being Black. I had a front row seat to the racist ideas and policies that society was and is committed to. My father dealt with this as a Black firefighter here at the City of Minneapolis from 1970 to 2000. From the department, as well as from residents that did not want assistance from a Black man, and they told him as such. But he was committed. He was a committed public servant, and he persevered, and he did retire as a captain. I also watched my mom deal with racism because she chose to love a Black man and start a family and create a life together. We were othered, and it was not easy. And I learned so much from them, and they're still together. But I also understood that there was a world where I was allowed to be
as a Black woman. I thought I had to straighten my hair to be more professional, to be accepted. I was fluent in code switching. I was prepared for the day when a stranger would call me a nigger. That day did come when I was riding the city bus here in Minneapolis, downtown. Her intent was to grade me into nothing. She was not successful. I knew my value, and I knew no one was going to take that from me. I learned how to survive in a racist system, always fighting against it in my own way, and the system was working as designed. But I had a plan. I knew I had to be in a position of power to impact the spaces that I was in. For a large part of my career, I put it on the line and I called things out that were not right. I learned that I did not have to alter myself to fit into some ridiculous norm. And I was more than qualified to do the job, trust me. I wasn't alone. I saw other folks doing the work and calling out racism too. I thought things were changing, but it was on the surface. For those of you who thought it was not so bad not to be white, let me put some things into context. In 2019 US News and Report, Minneapolis was ranked one of the 6 best places to live, out of ranked between 100 with the 125 largest metro areas. The joke at some of my dinner parties with my Black friends was, well, they didn't ask us. So, not just by lived experience, but by data, for the data people. And in the same year, the Twin Cities was ranked the 4th worst areas to live if you were Black. So let's break it down. A typical Black household in 2019 made $34,174 per year, compared to a white household that made $78,706. Just 1 year later, in May of 2020, the Washington Post reports that racial inequality in Minneapolis is among the worst in the nation. And homeownership among Black people is 1/3 the rate of white families. As a result, many Black families have been affected, locked out of the prosperity that the city's overwhelmingly white population enjoys. Roughly 1/4 of Black families in Minneapolis own their home, 1/4, which is one of the lowest Black ownership rates in the United States. The city's white families, by contrast, have one of the nation's highest rates at 76%. Interesting. Again, this is not new. I bring this up because I've heard comments. I am tired of talking about racism. Well, I have news for you. I'm tired of living it and watching other Black people live it and BIPOC people live it. I'm tired. Why did it take a man to lose his life on camera for this country to wake up to reality? I said to my children, George Floyd would be the last. My children looked at me and they said, no, Mom. I wanted them to be wrong, but they were right. In the same conversation, my 12-year-old daughter said, Mom, our generation's going to get it right. The continued loss of lives tell me that we live in a system that hasn't changed. If anything, it has gotten bolder in its hate. You see, the problem is not just in enforcement, but in everything. Access to housing, healthcare, education, university, food, technology, internet, banking, generational wealth. Jobs that are a livable wage, not a minimum wage. Hiring practice and a lack of Black and diverse leadership in our governments and businesses are also in need of overhaul, which we have committed to today. Don't get me started about the judicial system or the prison system. It's all connected. Like links in a chain shackled around our necks, wrists, and ankles, locking us tightly to the concept of racism. As a society, we can no longer ignore the fact that there are so many people left out of the American dream on purpose. We can no longer blame the oppressed and call them defective. When folks don't have hope, we are a society that lives in fear, rage, and discontent. In the last year, things have become crystal clear for me. I am at the right place at the right time, and I will not be muted. I will not. You're going to hear me. In all of this madness, I still have hope because I am seeing lots of different people take action, speaking up and calling it like it is. I'm going to brag a little, but in reg services, we are on our way. We have leaned into conversations that I would never have dreamed that would occur at work. I am hearing new voices standing up to challenge status quo. I have seen leadership call it out and speak to the elephant in the room. Quite frankly, any decision we are making, we're asking ourselves, what is the barrier to an anti-racist environment that we want? We are a solution. We can't contribute to the problem. We are pushing, challenging, and most importantly, we are acting and embedding these concepts into our department culture. We are not checking a box. It's not just a standalone. We are living it and we are doing it. This needs to happen in every department in the city. I want to do one story. So I'm an interim at traffic control. And for the first time in my life, I wore braids to work. And it was wonderful. I felt free. And I came home to visit my dad because I was proud because I made it through the first day in a new division, right? They have accepted me. Ricky, you're sitting there. And my dad said, when's management going to tell you to take out your braids? And I said, Daddy, I am management. Actually, I'm the deputy. So as we approach the 1-year anniversary of the killing of Mr. George Floyd, I have seen a city and state and a nation and a world respond in horror and call out systemic racism, and we're acting. We can no longer pretend that we are not complicit. I am tired of talking about change. I need action and doing, and I find it maddening when I hear people say, oh, I need to read about, and read and understand racism. And I get so frustrated because that's such a luxury. I want to scream and say, open your eyes, pay attention. It's right here. It's all around us. I want to personally spend my energies on living and doing and creating things, not fighting or legitimizing my existence. So, folks, we're at a crossroads of two possibilities. Do we pretend nothing is wrong? Continue to function in a superficial existence and repeat the vicious feedback loop of racism that hurts us all? I don't know about you, but I'm taking a hard left. We must create a new course, go to the root of the issue and acknowledge our part and change it. As a city, we must put unconditional equity in the center of everything that we do, where everyone belongs and has true options and choices and possibilities today and every day. And because I'm working with some of you, I remain hopeful. Thank you.
I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge a couple of things that you just said. She said she realized that she's in the right place at the right time. And I think that's something that could possibly even apply to all of us. So hopefully this is the right place. I am confident that this is the right time. I also want to acknowledge Captain Garnett, upon whose shoulders I stand upon. No matter how bad I thought that things may have been for me coming up, I know they were, probably 5 times that for him. So thank you to your father, Captain Garnett. Next, I'd like to bring up Daryl Spears to share his testimony.
Good morning. You know, it's a little hard to come behind somebody like Saray. I'm just grateful I can stand here. I want to acknowledge that we have ancestors that are all around this space. Our ancestors are here holding us, loving us, and keeping us here. Good morning or evening, friends. Here's your friendly announcer. I have serious news to pass on to everybody. What I'm about to say could mean the world's disaster, could change your joy and laughter to tears and pain. It's that love's in need of love today. Don't delay, send yours in right away. May 25th, 2020. May 25th, 2020. As we hunkered down to make a valiant attempt to survive a pandemic, there came a video of a brother being murdered in front of the world. I woke up the morning on May 26, 2020, ready to work. As I sat in my home office, I was going through emails, getting my day started. And my brother called me. He said, "Had you seen the TV? The world is going to change." Catching up, I took a moment and I turned on the news and watched. And while I watched this tragedy unfold, I began my own reflection. In my reflection, I remembered hearing stories of Emmett Till that my mother and father told. I remember hearing my teachers as a second grader talk about the murder of Martin Luther King. You see, I'm seasoned. I've seen America in some very dark times, and now I'm witnessing it again as a Black man, a son, a brother, a husband, and a father. During a conversation with one of my communities, someone stated that nothing will change. I reminded folk in that space, this was just days after burying John Lewis, that things do and will change. You see, I'm a believer of a glass half full, and there's always more to come. When I say there's more to come, I think about the work I do, being a Black man working in an enterprise that has been shaped by systemic actions designed to disenfranchise communities of color. Standing in this space, I think of equality. And when you see equality, if those of us remember our math, an equal sign is the same. It reaches from side to side. It doesn't deviate. There's no less than, there's no greater than. It's called equal. And that's what we should be working for. Standing in this space, I think about it. And equal travels on the same plane. It is my hope to continually show a glass full of promise. The promise of Frederick Douglass, the promise of Fannie Lou Hamer, the promise of Malcolm, the promise of Martin, the promise of Nellie Stone Johnson, the promise of Matthew Little, the promise of Tamir Rice, the promise of Philando Castile, the promise of Ahmaud Arbery, the promise of Breonna Taylor, and the promise of George Floyd. George Floyd. George Floyd. As I watched the protest and the flames, I felt the pain of my people. I remembered that my people have come a long way. While Jim Crow was spreading through America, Benjamin Banneker, a Black surveyor, designed the streets of Washington, D.C. Dr. Charles Drew developed the blood bank. Jesse Owens ran into history. And John Lewis led my people across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Now, here we are in 2021. And what can we do? No, what must we do to make Minneapolis and America better? For America to be a better land and a land of true opportunity for our great-grandchildren. My charge is this: to address the systemic and calculated disenfranchisement by working on changing some narratives, referring to landlords as owners and tenants as residents or renters. By doing this, we may be able to bring some humanity in what we do as employees of the city of Minneapolis and in regulatory services. To view the residents we serve as members of this community that deserve the best in us and better from this enterprise. I believe this is how we honor Sojourner Truth, Robert Taylor, Candace Motley, Harold Washington, and Ed Riddick. George Floyd has become our ancestor and continues to show us the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Not for some, but for all of us. Thank you.
I think Daryl hit on a very important point when he said if we can humanize things, whether that's in rental or just in life, I think we'll all be much better off. We find some of the craziest ways to separate and divide each other. At the end, we're all human. So it just doesn't make sense. I'd now like to call up Rob Sayers to read a poem. Thank you.
Wow. So much light. So much light in this space. I'm going to try and ride that light because there's a lot of heavy in this space too, right? I'm going to read a poem written by one of my sisters that has become one of my most recent ancestors. And I'm going to give it some context. We were participating in the Year of Learning around cultural, somatic, and psychological first aid. And we were doing presentations of slides. And my sister had a super difficult time with one particular slide. If you can imagine a map of the United States showing how it was originally inhabited by Native Americans, not showing the state's names. And in the upper left corner of that map, it stated, "It's not okay to be here." In the right-hand upper corner, it said, "It's been so long since it's not been okay to be here." And in the lower right corner, it stated, "Our bodies remember." She struggled with this slide and how to present on this slide. So she took some time, and wouldn't you know, it would change. This poem was written July 17th by my sister, my colleague, our friend. She was an auntie, a daughter, and one of the lightest human beings I've ever met in my life. She wrote this poem July 17th, 2019. Excuse me. The poem's entitled, It's Not Okay to Be Here. Amelia Brown, Creative City Making Program Manager for the Arts, Culture, and Creative Economy Division in the Coordinator's Office. She was also a consultant and the founder of Emergency Arts. It's not okay to be here. Where do we stand in this hemisphere? Go back to your country, says 45 Cavalier. While on stolen land, not new frontier, it's not okay to be here. Waves of ships dock at the pier, attempts to engineer supremacy of our bodies and our tears. It's not okay to be here. Built this country on backs and fears while screaming, you don't belong here. It's all too much, too little profiteer. It's not okay to be here. Flowing streams invisibly clear. Generations of blood don't disappear. A noose, a whip, a souvenir. It's not okay to be here. Wade in the water to endear a violent, sick atmosphere. Ancestors whisper in my ear, it's not okay to be here. There's no escape, cross the river near. Try to cleanse yourself, then face the fear. It's in the water everywhere. It's not okay to be here. Things are not as they appear. They change and morph to keep this tier. Where there's always a domineer, it's not okay to be here. Facing smiles so insincere, nodding heads while throwing spears. Yes, in our backs, right here. It's not okay to be here. Thriving as a puppeteer, who has the right to live this year? Nonetheless, thrive and persevere. It's not okay to be here. Our bodies remember this place, this sphere. This land is not free and clear. Protective, not defective, dear. It's not okay to be here. Make space for just this day, mountaineer. For the promised land to climb, to steer. For generations of children don't have to hear. It's not okay to be here. I'm gonna ask for a moment of silence for our colleague, our beloved sister, Amelia Brown. We remember you with gratitude and love, sis.
I was fortunate to know Amelia. I worked with Amelia as a creative city making artist for a number of years, and also through Springboard and some of her work there. And I've also worked with folks who were close to Amelia since then. And I know that the place that it sits for me is heavy in my heart. And I know that that's where stress, trauma, too much can land. And our hearts don't know what to do, but become overwhelmed. So today, as we prepare to leave this gathering and return to our workday, perhaps you have the rest of the day off, maybe you don't. Maybe you have to go back, have meetings about logistics or other things that are happening. So as we transition to that, I want to invite us to realize that the information that's shared between our heads and our hearts, most of it goes up. Most of us think that our brains control the rest of our bodies. Only 20% of information that is shared between our hearts and our brains goes down. Our brain is being fed 80% of its information from our heart. And so while we are not going to solve and change white supremacy today, it's not going to happen. This is one small moment of acknowledgement, one small moment of memorial, one small moment for us to say what's next. And I invite us to actually notice that we have a heartbeat in this moment. If that means you need to sit up a little bit straighter, change your position, or just shift your attention, and just notice that your heart is beating. And as the year goes on and the summer continues, there'll be more offerings of somatic workshops for folks to learn and come together. Because one of the first things that colonization does is disconnection. It's the #1 tool of colonization. That includes our own systems, our own bodies, our own hands, our own thoughts, our own feet, all of it. And so the first step to decolonize our health and look at our holistic health on a larger scale, including micro to macro, is to actually explore what is that connection. The willingness to be uncomfortable in our bodies, the willingness to experience fear, trauma, joy, pain, all the things we don't know what to do with. So I invite you, as this week comes, when it feels like so much, like your heart is ready to explode because you don't know what else to do, I invite you to place your hand over your heart. And I invite you to just remind your own self, I'm here, we are still here, we have resources, we can change. That resource in your heart and your breath, just giving your heart a little bit more space and breathing a couple times into that. I want to extend a deep amount of gratitude for you all who have been working at the City of Minneapolis throughout the last year. And all of you have been working so tirelessly and bringing your truths in a way that is far above and beyond your pay grade, far and above beyond your job descriptions. And I want you to please carry that gratitude of that folks see, we feel, we acknowledge, and this is just one step. And may we all find a renewing resource for us to move from here so that we find a way for it to be okay, for all of us to be here together.
Thank you. Before we close, I would like to take this opportunity to share a few closing thoughts. This assembly is not the culmination of our work, but the beginning. Not the end of our journey, but the start. If you've grown up in Minnesota, then you've heard of a pretty famous senator around here named Paul Wellstone. Senator Wellstone's most famous quote is, "When we all do better, we all do better." Seems simple enough, logical, seemingly common sense. When most people hear this quote, they tend to gravitate to one of two parts. Many gravitate to "we all." It signals inclusiveness and thus appeals to populations who have been historically marginalized and left out of the opportunities that this nation purports to provide to all. Others gravitate to better because, well, better is better. It's an improvement over our current situation, the status quo. I, however, think the focus needs to be on the word "do." None of what we are striving to accomplish will be realized unless we are all willing to do. I'll remind you that he didn't say do worse. He didn't say do the same. He said do better. And better doesn't mean that I have to do better than you or you better than me. It just means that we have to do better than we did the day before. Become better versions of ourselves. And each day presents an opportunity to become a better self than the day before. One of my heroes, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., famously said, "If you can't run, then walk. And if you can't walk, then crawl." Whatever you do, you have to keep moving. Now, I couldn't agree more with the Reverend, but more and more, in all honesty, I'm really growing tired of crawling. I'm ready to get up, stand up, and walk. As I mentioned before, this is the beginning of a long, long journey. So I leave you with an old African proverb. It goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So right here and now, in the humblest way I know how, I'm extending an invitation to all of you, not a demand, not a requirement, but an invitation to participate in this shared journey towards racial reckoning, towards bringing an end to racial injustice, and towards the creation of an anti-racist culture, and towards the realization of true equity and equality, both within the enterprise and in the city of Minneapolis. Will you come? I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's event, either in person, online, or maybe even later as you watch the recording. I'd like to thank everyone who presented in today's program. Could you give them a round of applause, please? I'd also like to thank everyone who put in the work to really make this happen and to get this ball rolling. I'd like to announce some upcoming events we have. This is, like I said, this is just the beginning. So we do have some other events coming up this week. We will have a reading of the employee commitment letter at the next city council meeting. We will have brave, safe space conversations throughout the month. We will have a Racial Day of Reckoning bell chimes concert tomorrow at noon. We will have a community-led event right over here in Commons Park tomorrow at 11 a.m. I believe we're going to have a proclamation coming up from Mayor Fry, as well as a resolution from the City Council. We will also be having more somatic healing sessions to be offered on all 3 shifts throughout the next few months. And we are also going to offer some healing with art sessions to help people build capacity and try to heal from all the events of the past year and earlier. So with that, I invite you all to, everybody here, to join us for refreshments and take a few minutes to converse with each other and decompress. If you are not here, I invite you to take a few minutes to just kind of gather yourselves and your thoughts and before you return to the world. And that goes the same for those watching this recording. Lastly, I would ask that every one of us take some time each day to a few minutes to feed our bodies, a few minutes to feed our minds, and a few minutes to feed our souls. Thank you.